The hospital ship drifted through the darkness of space like a white ghost against the endless black. Her name was the UENS Mercy, and she was the largest medical vessel ever built by human hands. Captain Daniel stood on the bridge and watched the stars pass by on the main screen. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Earth Navy for 30 years, but he had never commanded a warship. He had chosen a different path. He had chosen to save lives instead of taking them. The Mercy carried no weapons. Not a single gun or missile sat in her hull. Instead, she carried 12 operating rooms, 400 hospital beds, and the most advanced medical equipment humanity had ever created. Her hull was painted bright white, and on every side, the red cross of humanitarian aid glowed against the darkness. Every ship in the galaxy knew what that symbol meant. It meant this vessel was here to help. It meant this vessel was protected under the galactic conventions of neutrality. It meant that no matter what war was being fought, this ship was off limits. Dr. Lisa walked onto the bridge with a tablet in her hand. She was the chief medical officer, a woman in her 40s with short brown hair and a face that rarely smiled. She had seen too much suffering to smile easily, but she was good at her job. She was one of the best surgeons Earth had ever produced, and she had given up a comfortable life back home to serve on the Mercy. "Captain, we have 312 patients on board now," she said. "The last shuttle just arrived from Arcturus IV." Nodded slowly. Arcturus IV was a colony world caught between two alien empires. The Dominion and the Collective had been fighting over it for months. The humans who lived there had nothing to do with the war. They were just farmers and miners trying to make a living on a distant world. But war did not care about innocent people. War never did. "How bad is it down there?" asked. Doctor looked at her tablet. "The northern settlements are gone. Orbital bombardment. The southern regions are holding, but they are running out of medical supplies. We evacuated as many wounded as we could, but there are still thousands down there who need help." Closed his eyes for a moment. He wished he could do more. He wished he had a bigger ship, more doctors, more supplies. But the Mercy was just one vessel, and the galaxy was full of suffering. "We will make another run tomorrow," he said. "Tell the crew to rest while they can." Doctor nodded and left the bridge, turned back to the main screen and watched the planet below. Arcturus IV was a beautiful world, covered in green forests and blue oceans. From up here, you could not see the fires or the ruins or the bodies. From up here, it looked peaceful. In the medical bay on Deck 7, Nurse Morgan was checking on her patients. She was young, only 26, with red hair tied back in a ponytail. She had joined the Mercy straight out of nursing school because she wanted to make a difference. She wanted to help people who had nowhere else to turn. The bay was full. Every bed was occupied. There were men and women and children, all of them wounded, all of them scared, moved from bed to bed, checking vital signs and adjusting IV drips. She stopped at the bed of a little girl named Sophie. The girl was only 8 years old. She had lost her left arm in a bombing raid. She was sleeping now, her face pale against the white pillow. Reached down and gently brushed the hair from Sophie's forehead. She did not know what to say to a child who had lost so much. She did not know how to explain why the universe could be so cruel. So she just stood there for a moment, watching the girl sleep, and then she moved on to the next bed. In the operating room, Dr. Cole was finishing a surgery. He was a trauma surgeon, a man in his 50s who had worked in war zones all over Earth before joining the Mercy. He had steady hands and a calm voice, and he never panicked, no matter how bad things got. Right now, he was removing a piece of shrapnel from a young man's chest. The patient was a colonist named Peter, only 19 years old. He had been caught in an explosion while trying to rescue his neighbors. Dr. Cole worked carefully, his instruments moving with precision. The shrapnel was close to the heart. One wrong move could kill the boy, but Cole had done this 100 times before. He knew what he was doing. "Clamp," he said, and his assistant handed him the tool. He secured the blood vessel and then slowly, carefully, pulled the metal fragment free. It was the size of his thumb, jagged and ugly. He dropped it into a tray with a soft clink. "Close him up," he said. "He is going to be fine." The assistant nodded and began stitching the wound. Dr. Cole stepped back and pulled off his surgical gloves. His hands were shaking slightly. They always did after a close one. He walked out of the operating room and leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. Outside the Mercy, 3 warships had been following the hospital ship for 3 days. They kept their distance, but they were always there, watching. The lead ship was called the Talon's Edge, and her commander was an officer named. Was a creature of angles and sharp edges. His skin was dark purple and his eyes were yellow with vertical pupils. He sat in his command chair and watched the human hospital ship on his screen. He felt nothing but contempt for these creatures. Humans were soft. They wasted resources on the weak and the dying. They sent unarmed ships into war zones to save people who were already broken. It was foolish. It was weak. A message came through from Dominion High Command. Read it carefully. His thin lips curled into something that might have been a smile. The message was simple. The humans needed to be reminded of their place in the galaxy. They were newcomers, barely 50 years into space travel. They thought they could wander into territory and do whatever they wanted. They thought their precious conventions and treaties would protect them. They were wrong. Turned to his weapons officer. "Target the human vessel," he said. "All batteries." The weapons officer hesitated. "Commander, that ship is marked as a medical vessel. The conventions state that we cannot fire on them." His yellow eyes narrowed. "I gave you an order, fire." The weapons officer swallowed hard and turned to his console. His fingers moved across the controls. On the bridge of the Mercy, Captain was about to leave for the night when the alarm started screaming. He spun around and looked at the tactical display. 3 warships were powering up their weapons. They were aiming at his ship. "This is Captain Daniel of the UENS Mercy," he said into the comm, his voice steady. "We are a hospital ship. We are unarmed. We are carrying wounded civilians. Please hold your fire." There was no response. The ships continued to charge their weapons. Felt his heart pounding in his chest. This could not be happening. No one fired on hospital ships. It was the one rule that every civilization followed. It was sacred. The first plasma bolt hit the Mercy amidships. The explosion tore through Deck 4, killing 20 people instantly. The ship shuddered and groaned as alarms screamed through every corridor. Grabbed the edge of his console to keep from falling. "All hands brace for impact," he shouted into the comm. "This is not a drill. We are under attack." The second volley was already on its way. The second volley struck the Mercy like the fist of an angry god. 3 plasma bolts hit the ship at once, ripping through her hull and sending fire racing through the corridors. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency lighting. Smoke filled the air. The screams of the wounded mixed with the shriek of tearing metal. Captain Daniel pulled himself up from the deck. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead, but he did not notice. He looked around the bridge and saw chaos. 2 of his officers were dead, their bodies thrown against the far wall by the explosion. A third was trying to put out a fire with an extinguisher. The main screen was cracked but still working, showing the 3 warships hanging in space like predators watching their prey. "Get me communications," shouted. "I need to send a distress signal." Peters, the young communications officer, was already at his station. His hands were shaking, but he was doing his job. "I am trying, Captain. The main antenna array is damaged. I am rerouting through the secondary systems." Another explosion rocked the ship. This one came from below, somewhere in the medical decks. Felt his stomach twist. The patients. 300 wounded civilians were down there, helpless in their beds. "Keep working," he told Peters. "Get that signal out. The galaxy needs to know what is happening here." In Ward 7, Nurse Morgan was fighting to save lives. The explosion had torn a hole in the ceiling, and debris had fallen on several beds. Fires burned in the corners of the room. The sprinkler system was trying to put them out, but the water was mixing with blood on the floor, creating a red river that flowed toward the drain. Grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it at the nearest flames. Her ears were ringing from the blast. She could barely hear anything, but she could see the patients struggling to get out of their beds, crawling toward the exits, crying for help. "Everyone stay calm," she shouted, even though she was not calm at all. "We are going to get you out of here. Just stay calm." She ran to the nearest bed and found an old man trapped under a fallen beam. His legs were pinned and he was coughing from the smoke. Tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy. She looked around for help and saw another nurse, a young man named Greg Taylor, stumbling through the smoke. "Greg, help me," she called out. "He is trapped." Greg ran over and together. They lifted the beam just enough for the old man to pull his legs free, helped him into a wheelchair, and pointed toward the exit. "Go to the escape pods on deck 3, she said. "Follow the emergency lights. Do not stop for anything." The old man nodded and wheeled himself toward the door, turned to find the next patient. There were so many who needed help. She did not know how she was going to save them all. In the operating room, Dr. Cole was performing surgery when the attack began. The lights went out and the ship shook violently, but he did not stop. He could not stop. He had a patient on the table, a woman with internal bleeding. If he stopped now, she would die. "Flashlight," he said to his assistant, and someone pressed a small light into his hand. He held it in his teeth and kept working, his fingers moving by memory as much as by sight. The deck tilted beneath him. Something exploded nearby, and he felt the heat of it on his back, but he kept working. "Almost there," he muttered through the flashlight. "Just a little more." He found the bleeding vessel and clamped it. Then he sutured it closed with quick, practiced movements. The woman's vital signs stabilized. She was going to live. "Get her to an escape pod," he said, pulling off his gloves. "I am going to find more survivors." He ran out of the operating room and into a corridor filled with smoke. Bodies lay on the floor. Some were patients. Some were crew members. He checked each one as he passed, looking for signs of life. Most were already gone. The few who were still breathing, he pointed toward the escape pods and told them to run. On the bridge, Peters finally got the distress signal working. He broadcast on every frequency he could reach, sending the Mercy's location and a desperate plea for help. "This is the UENS Mercy. We are a hospital ship under attack by warships. We have 300 civilian patients on board. We are unarmed. Repeat, we are unarmed. Please send assistance immediately." He sent the message over and over, praying that someone would hear it, praying that someone would come. Captain watched the ships on the screen. They were moving closer, preparing for another attack. He knew the Mercy could not survive another volley. The ship was already breaking apart. Fires burned on every deck. The hull was breached in a dozen places. They had minutes at most. "All hands abandon ship," he said into the comm. His voice was calm and steady, the voice of a man who had accepted his fate. "Get to the escape pods. Save as many patients as you can. Do not wait for anyone, just go." He turned to his remaining bridge crew. "That means you too. Get out of here." The officers hesitated. They did not want to leave their captain, but looked at them with those tired eyes and nodded toward the door. "Go, that is an order." One by one they left. Peters was the last to go. He stopped at the door and looked back at. "Captain, come with us. There is still time." Shook his head. "Someone needs to keep broadcasting. Someone needs to make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. Now go, son. Go and live." Peters swallowed hard. Then he turned and ran. Sat down in his command chair and kept broadcasting. He told the universe about the Mercy. He told them about the patients. He told them about the children in Ward 3, the pregnant women in Ward 5, the elderly and the sick and the dying. He told them that his ship had no weapons. He told them that his people had done nothing wrong. The third volley came. The bridge exploded around him. Daniel died with his hand on the comm button, still talking, still telling the truth. The Mercy broke apart in the cold darkness of space. Her white hull shattered into 1,000 pieces. The red cross that had promised safety to so many was torn apart and scattered among the stars. From the debris, 67 escape pods tumbled away. They carried the survivors, the lucky few who had made it out in time. Dr. Cole was in one of those pods. Nurse Morgan was in another, holding the hand of little Sophie, the girl who had lost her arm. They watched through the tiny windows as their ship died. Among the dead were 233 crew members. Among the dead were 219 patients. Among the dead were 112 children. 8 hours later, the distress signal reached Earth. Admiral Vance was in her office at Fleet Command when the message came through. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a face that had seen too many wars. She listened to the recording in silence. She watched the final images from the Mercy's cameras, showing the ship burning, showing the Red Cross being torn apart by plasma fire. When the recording ended, she sat very still for a long moment. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, from rage. A cold, quiet rage that started in her chest and spread through her entire body. She picked up her secure phone and called the United Earth Council. "They fired on a hospital ship," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something hard and sharp. "They killed our doctors, they killed our nurses, they killed 112 children." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was like ice. "I want authorization for a full military response. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, they are going to pay for this." On the other end of the line, the council listened, and they agreed. The Galactic Council met on a space station at the center of known space. It was a massive structure, built by a dozen different species over thousands of years. Here, the great powers of the galaxy came together to discuss treaties, trade agreements, and the rules of war. Here, the conventions of civilization were supposed to mean something. The council chamber was a vast circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Representatives from 30 different species sat in those seats, watching and waiting. They were there, their purple skin and yellow eyes standing out among the crowd. They were there too, their bodies clicking and buzzing in their seats. And at the far end of the chamber, in a section that had been added only 50 years ago, sat the human delegation. Ambassador Shaw walked to the central platform. He was not an impressive man to look at. He was average height, with brown hair going gray at the temples and a face that was more kind than fierce. Before becoming a diplomat, he had been a high school history teacher in a small town in Ohio. He still looked like one. He wore simple clothes and carried no weapons. He did not raise his voice or pound his fist. But when he spoke, the entire chamber went quiet. 53 hours ago, 3 warships of the Dominion opened fire on the UENS Mercy, he said. His voice was calm and clear. The Mercy was a hospital ship. She was clearly marked with the symbol of humanitarian aid. She was broadcasting her status on all frequencies. She carried no weapons. She was not a threat to anyone. He paused and looked around the chamber. The Mercy was carrying 312 wounded civilians, men, women, and children who had been evacuated from the war zone on Arcturus IV. They were under the protection of the Galactic Conventions of Neutrality. They should have been safe. The ambassador, a tall creature named Eth, rose from his seat. His mandibles clicked as he spoke. "The Dominion acknowledges this incident," he said. "It was a regrettable mistake. Our ship's the human vessel as a military transport. We offer our condolences to the families of the deceased." A murmur ran through the chamber. Ambassador Shaw did not react. He simply waited for Eth to finish. "The Dominion will conduct an internal review of this matter," Eth continued. We assure the Council that appropriate measures will be taken to prevent such accidents in the future." He sat down, looking satisfied. The matter was closed as far as he was concerned. These things happened in war. The humans were new to the galaxy. They would learn to accept it. Ambassador Shaw smiled. It was not a warm smile. "A mistake," he said softly. "A misidentification. Tell me, Ambassador Eth, do your ships not have sensors? Do they not have visual displays?" The Mercy was painted white with a red cross visible from 1,000 kilometers away. She was broadcasting her status continuously for 3 days while your ships followed her. 3 days. Eth's yellow eyes narrowed. "As I said, it was a regrettable incident. The Dominion does not make a habit of explaining itself to lesser species." The chamber went very still. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. No one challenged them openly. Ambassador Shaw nodded slowly. "I see. So you will not apologize. You will not punish those responsible. You will simply call it an accident and move on." "That is correct," Eth said. "You would be wise to accept our condolences and let this matter rest. The Dominion has been patient with your species, human. Do not test that patience." Shaw looked down at the platform for a moment. When he looked up again, something had changed in his eyes. The kindness was still there, but beneath it was something else. Something hard and cold. "I want to tell you a story, Ambassador," he said. "A story about my people, about who we are." He began to walk slowly around the platform as he spoke. "Humans have been fighting wars for as long as we can remember. We have killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas. We have invented terrible weapons and used them on our own brothers and sisters. In many ways, we are not a peaceful species." He paused and looked at the delegation. "But even in our darkest hours, even when we hated each other with all our hearts, there were some lines we did not cross. We did not kill the doctors who came to help the wounded. We did not attack the ships that carried the Red Cross. We did not murder children in hospital beds." His voice grew quieter, but somehow it carried even further. "These rules were not always followed. Sometimes in the madness of war they were broken, but when they were broken there was always a reckoning. Always. Because we understood something that you do not seem to understand, Ambassador. We understood that there must be limits, even in war, especially in war." Eth made a dismissive gesture with one of his clawed hands. "Your human morality does not concern us. The strong do what they will. The weak accept what they must. That is the way of the universe." "Perhaps," Shaw said. "But you have made an error in your thinking, Ambassador. You believe that because we sent doctors and nurses into war zones, because we built hospital ships instead of battleships, because we tried to save lives instead of taking them, that we are weak." He stopped walking and faced the delegation directly. "You are wrong." The chamber was completely silent. "The United Earth government formally withdraws from the Galactic Conventions of Neutrality," Shaw announced. "These conventions were meant to protect the innocent. They have failed. We will not pretend otherwise." Eth leaned forward, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "You cannot withdraw. The conventions are binding on all signatories." "They are binding on those who respect them," Shaw replied. "The Dominion has demonstrated that it does not. Therefore, we see no reason to continue our participation." He turned to address the full council. "To the other species of this council, we bear no ill will. We ask only that you stay out of our way. What happens next is between humanity and the Dominion." The ambassador raised a limb. "What exactly do you intend to do, Ambassador Shaw?" Shaw looked at him for a long moment before answering. "For 50 years, humanity has been the quiet neighbor. We have traded peacefully with all who wish to trade. We have stayed out of your wars. We have asked only to be left alone." He paused. "The Dominion has decided that they do not wish to leave us alone. They have attacked our healers. They have murdered our children. They have shown us exactly how much our peace and our mercy mean to them." His voice hardened. "So now we will show them what humanity looks like when we stop being peaceful, when we stop being merciful, when we remember what we truly are." He began walking toward the exit. "We are not just doctors and diplomats, Ambassador Ev. We are also the species that split the atom. We are the species that conquered our own world through fire and blood and iron. We are the species that looked into the void and decided to make it our own." He reached the door and turned back one final time. "You wanted war with humanity. Congratulations, you have it." And then he was gone. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Ev demanded that the humans be punished for their arrogance. The called for calm. Other species simply watched in silence, wondering what would happen next. None of them noticed that the human delegation had already left the station. None of them knew that the first signals were already traveling toward Earth, carrying the authorization for war. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, there was a place that did not officially exist. It had no name on any map. It appeared in no registry. If you asked the Earth government about it, they would tell you there was nothing there but rocks and empty space. They would be lying. The shipyard stretched for hundreds of kilometers through the darkness. Massive construction platforms hung in the void, connected by a web of supply lines and transport tubes. For 50 years, while humanity smiled and traded and played the peaceful newcomer, these shipyards had been working in secret, building, preparing, waiting. Admiral Vance stood on the observation deck of the Central Command Station and watched the fleet come to life. 72 warships hung in formation before her. They were not hospital ships. They were not cargo vessels. They were weapons of war, built for one purpose and one purpose only. The flagship was called the UENS Judgment. She was a kilometer long, her hull black as the space around her, lined her sides like the spines of some ancient predator. Missile batteries covered her back. Her engines were capable of speeds that no ship could match. She was beautiful and terrible, and she had never been seen by any eye outside of Earth. "The fleet is ready, Admiral," said Captain. He was a tall man with dark skin and a shaved head. His eyes were hard, the eyes of a soldier who had been waiting for this moment his entire career. "All ships report green across the board. Weapons charged, crews standing by." Vance nodded slowly. She had spent 30 years building this fleet. 30 years of secrets and lies and careful planning. She had always hoped it would never be needed. She had always prayed that humanity would never have to show the galaxy what it was truly capable of. They had taken that hope away. "You have seen the casualty reports," she said quietly. It was not a question. "Yes, Admiral," replied. 452 dead. 112 of them were children. "Children," Vance repeated. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they were cold. The youngest was 3 years old. Her name was Emma. She was in the burn ward, recovering from injuries she received when her family's farm was bombed. She survived the war. She survived the evacuation. And then they murdered her in her hospital bed. Said nothing. There was nothing to say. "I want you to remember that name, Captain," Vance continued. "Emma, 3 years old. I want everyone in this fleet to remember it. When we reach Prime, when we engage their ships, when we tear their empire apart, I want every single person under my command to remember why we are doing this." "They will remember," Admiral said. "I promise you that." Vance turned away from the window. "Then let us begin. Order the fleet to move out. Destination Prime." Across the fleet, the orders came through. Engineers powered up the massive jump drives that would carry them across the stars. Gunners checked their weapons one final time. Pilots climbed into their fighters and ran through their pre-flight checks. In the barracks of the Judgment, Sergeant Drake gathered her squad around her. She was a small woman with short hair and scars on her hands from a dozen different battles. She had served in the Earth Marines for 15 years, fighting in conflicts that the public never heard about. She was good at her job. She was very good. "Listen up," she said to her soldiers. "You all know why we are here. You all saw what they did to the Mercy, to our doctors, to our kids." The faces around her were hard and angry. They had all seen the footage. They had all read the names of the dead. "The brass tells me that they have never lost a war," Drake continued. "They have been fighting for 10,000 years. They think they are invincible. They think we are soft." She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "We are going to show them what soft looks like. We are going to burn their fleet. We are going to break their defenses. And when we stand over the ashes of they are going to remember this day for the rest of their miserable existence." Her squad cheered. The sound echoed through the ship. In the fighter bay, Lieutenant Tyler Grant climbed into the cockpit of his attack craft. He was young, only 24, with brown hair, and a face that still looked like it belonged on a college campus. But he had been flying since he was 16, and he had more combat simulations than anyone else in the fleet. His wingman, Lieutenant Sarah Hill, was in the next fighter over. She was checking her weapons systems with the calm focus of a professional. "You ready for this?" Grant asked over their private channel. "Born ready," she replied. "These bastards killed my cousin. She was a nurse on the Mercy. Her name was—" Grant felt a chill run down his spine. He had not known that. He looked at his wingman with new understanding. "Then let us make them pay," he said. The fleet jumped. Across the galaxy, the Dominion had no idea what was coming. Their intelligence services had long since concluded that humanity was not a military threat. The humans had a small defense force, a few dozen outdated patrol ships. They had never fought a major war in space. They were traders and farmers and doctors, not warriors. Commander, the officer who had ordered the attack on the Mercy, was celebrating his victory. The High Command had praised him for teaching the humans their place. He had been given a medal and a promotion. He expected to be made an admiral within the year. He was reviewing fleet dispositions in his quarters when the first alarm sounded. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. Probably another drill. His crew was always running drills. Then the second alarm sounded, and the third, and suddenly every alarm on the ship was screaming at once. Ran to the bridge. His officers were staring at their screens with expressions of disbelief. "Report," he demanded. "Commander," said his sensor officer, his voice shaking, "we have detected unknown vessels emerging from faster-than-light travel. They are heading directly for Prime." "How many vessels?" asked. The sensor officer looked at him with wide eyes. 72, Commander, and they are not slowing down." Felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Fear. He looked at the tactical display and saw the human fleet burning toward his like a swarm of angry insects. "That is impossible," he whispered. "The humans do not have a fleet. They cannot have built a fleet." But the sensors did not lie. The humans were here, and they were coming. "All ships battle stations," ordered. "Scramble every fighter we have. Alert the home defense fleet. We must stop them before they reach the planet." His crew scrambled to obey. Around him, the Dominion's mighty war machine began to wake. 200 warships moved to intercept the human fleet. Thousands of fighters launched from orbital platforms. Weapons batteries on the planet's surface powered up, ready to repel any attack. They had never lost a war. They had 10,000 years of military tradition. They outnumbered the humans 3-1. They thought it would be enough. They were wrong. The Battle of Prime began at 6 minutes past midnight local time. The defense fleet had formed a wall between the human ships and their 200 warships, each one battle-tested and crewed by veterans of a dozen conflicts. Behind them, the planet glittered with the lights of 1 billion inhabitants. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Judgment and studied the enemy formation. They had done what she expected. They had gathered their strength in one place, confident in their numbers, confident in their technology, confident in their 10,000 years of military tradition. They had no idea what was coming. "All ships, this is Admiral Vance," she said into the fleet-wide channel. "You know why we are here. You know what they did. Today we make them answer for it. Today we show the galaxy that there are some lines you do not cross." She paused. "For the mercy, for our dead, for our children." Across the fleet, 72 crews responded with a single word. "For Earth." Vance nodded to Captain. "Begin the attack." The human fleet did not stop. It did not slow down. It accelerated. They had expected a careful approach, a cautious probe of their defenses. That was how wars were fought. That was how they had always been fought. The humans had not read that manual. Lieutenant Tyler Grant was the first to engage. His fighter squadron screamed ahead of the main fleet, moving faster than any sensor had ever tracked. They punched through the enemy fighter screen like a bullet through paper, leaving explosions and debris in their wake. "Stay on my wing," Grant called to Sarah Hill. "We are going for the carriers." "Right behind you," she replied. They dove through a storm of plasma fire, their ships twisting and rolling in patterns that seemed impossible. 2 enemy fighters tried to intercept them. Grant destroyed the first with a burst from his main guns. Sarah took out the second with a missile that tracked through a cloud of debris and found its target. The carrier was a massive ship, 3 kilometers long. It was launching fighters as fast as it could, trying to turn the tide of the battle. Grant did not give it the chance. He dropped his payload directly into the ship's main hangar bay. The explosion tore the carrier in half. On the bridge of the Talon's edge, Commander watched his fleet being torn apart. The humans were everywhere, their black ships cutting through his formations like blades through flesh. They punched through shields as if they were not there. Their missiles swarmed his destroyers, overwhelming their point defense systems and tearing them apart from the inside. "This is not possible," he whispered. "How are they doing this?" He did not understand. He could not understand. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had been the masters of warfare. They had conquered 100 worlds. They had crushed every enemy who had dared to challenge them. And now these humans, these soft, weak creatures who sent doctors into war zones and cried over dead children, were destroying everything he had ever believed in. "Commander," his tactical officer shouted, "the flagship is targeting us." Looked at the screen and saw the Judgment coming straight for him. The massive dreadnought was ignoring everything else, pushing through the battle like a predator hunting specific prey. "All power to engines," he ordered. "Get us out of here." The Talon's edge tried to run. It did not make it far. The Judgment was faster, and Captain was not in the mood to let his quarry escape. "Open a channel," ordered. The screen flickered and his face appeared. His yellow eyes were wide with fear. His mandibles were trembling. "Commander," said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "I have been wanting to meet you." "I am a commander of the Dominion," said. "I demand to be treated according to the conventions of war." Smiled. It was not a nice smile. "The conventions of war. You mean the same conventions you ignored when you fired on a hospital ship. The same conventions that were supposed to protect 300 wounded civilians. The same conventions that should have kept 112 children alive." His face twisted. "I was following orders. The High Command told me to send a message to your people. I was just doing my duty." "Your duty," repeated. "Your duty was to murder doctors and nurses and children. Your duty was to fire on a ship that could not fight back. Your duty was to show the galaxy that the Dominion does not care about mercy or compassion or basic decency." He leaned forward. "Well, Commander, now it is my duty to show you what happens when you cross humanity. My duty to teach you a lesson that your species will never forget." Tried to speak, to beg, to bargain. Cut the channel. Fire, he said. The Judgment's main battery spoke, and the Talon's edge ceased to exist. The Battle of Prime lasted 6 hours. By the end, the defense fleet had been reduced to debris. 40% of their ships were destroyed. Another 30% were too damaged to fight. Their orbital platforms were gone. Their fighter core had been annihilated. The human fleet hung in orbit over Prime, their weapons pointed at the planet below. Admiral Vance broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Vance of the United Earth Navy. The Dominion has committed an act of war against humanity by attacking the UENS Mercy and murdering 452 unarmed civilians, including 112 children. We have responded. She paused. We could continue. We could turn your cities to glass. We could burn your world until nothing remains. We have the power to do this, and many of my people believe we should. On the planet below, 1 billion listened in terrified silence. But we are not going to do that, Vance continued. Because we are not like you. We do not murder civilians. We do not attack the helpless. We do not kill children in their beds. Her voice hardened. However, there will be a reckoning. Every officer involved in the attack on the Mercy will be surrendered to human authorities for trial. Full reparations will be paid to the families of the victims, and a new clause will be added to galactic law, stating that any attack on a medical vessel will be considered an act of war against all signatory nations. She waited a moment for her words to sink in. You have 12 hours to accept these terms. If you refuse, we will resume our attack, and we will not stop until there is nothing left to burn. The government accepted in 3 hours. 1 year later, Ambassador Shaw returned to the Galactic Council. The delegation was notably absent. Eth had been handed over to human authorities as part of the surrender agreement. He was currently serving a life sentence on a prison world. After the session, a delegate from the Federation approached Shaw. She was a small creature with silver fur and large black eyes. Your people frightened us, she admitted. We thought you were peaceful, soft. We did not expect such destruction. Shaw looked at her for a long moment. We are peaceful, he said. We build hospitals. We send doctors into war zones. We cry over our dead and bury our children with flowers and songs. That is who we are. He paused. But we also remember. We remember every wrong done to us. We remember every innocent life taken. And when someone crosses the line, when someone hurts the people we are sworn to protect, we do not forget. We do not forgive. The delegate nodded slowly. We will remember that. Shaw smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good, because humanity never forgets. He walked away, leaving the delegate standing alone in the empty corridor. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Some lines should never be crossed. And humanity would make sure they never were again.